Molly Sugden, Joanna Lumley, EastEnders and the Munich Olympics have in common? Guessed it?
Ground floor perfumery, stationery and leather goods, wigs and haberdashery, kitchenware...
Yes, the answer is, are you being served? We're off on a journey through 40 years of comedy, charting the intertwining careers of some of the best performers and writers from the golden age of sitcom, from Hancock's Half Hour to Hello Hello and beyond. Are You Being Served was born when in 1969, hotshot BBC comedy producer David Croft met fellow writer and performer Jeremy Lloyd for the very first time. But our story begins when Jeremy Lloyd was better known for playing chinless toffs on one of America's most famous comedy shows.
Here come the judge, here come the judge, order in the courtroom, here come the judge.
Dan Rowan and Dick Martin.
After writing and appearing on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, Jeremy Lloyd fell in love with An English Rose and said goodbye to America.
Really, I think what persuaded me to write Are You Being Served was Joanna Lumley, who's my rather dear and great friend and ex-wife, said, well, look, you've run out of money, you've come back from America and you don't appear to be able to get a job. Why don't you write about something you really know about? And you did, you were very amusing about your time at Simpsons in Piccadilly. Why don't you write about that?
Meanwhile, David Croft was raiding the past to produce a show that was as influential in Britain as Laugh-In was in America.
I am wearing a toupee. A wig, if that makes it any clearer. So if any of you want a good laugh at my expense, now's your chance. Because I'm going to show it to you.
While Dad's army was going from strength to strength, a show called It's Awfully Bad for Your Eyes, Darling needed expert help. David Croft was brought in to work on the scripts, and there met Jeremy Lloyd, who was appearing alongside his wife, Joanna Lumley. The Croft and Lloyd partnership was to last longer than the marriage.
I think while we were doing that, he told me about a show he was doing about a department store. Point of fact, I think he had written it to just a gentleman's department, because that's the thing he had experience of. I thought it would be more fun if we brought the ladies in and the gentlemen had to give away half their department, and so there was a conflict straight away. And that's how Are You Being Served was born, actually.
The pilot script was written inside 3 days, and for Jeremy it was easier than measuring inside legs for a living, though not always as pleasurable.
Well, look, the girl who operates the lift should be here to help us with the move.
Oh, never mind. Come along. Oh, Miss Brahms, pull your skirt down.
Some of the characters were at Simpsons, yes, absolutely. The Captain Peacocks were there, certainly. The Mrs. Slocums were in another department. Slightly more upmarket, probably Mrs. Slocums, but nevertheless the same. Mr. Humphreys was definitely there.
Croft and Lloyd found their perfect Captain Peacock in an actor who'd been displaying his talents in Steptoe and Son, and in Hancock's most famous Half Hour.
Do you come here often?
This is my 12th time.
There's no need to boast about it, old man. How much did you give to the Arab refugees?
Oh, really?
Come on. How much? You're shouting about how much blood you've given. How much did you give to the Arab refugees?
Well, if you must know, I gave £5.
Oh, well, there you are. I mean, some people are better...
I was known as a useful type. I do one episode of that, one episode of that. I didn't make a fortune, but I was working fairly regularly, supporting my wife and daughter. But then... Are You Being Served came along, and suddenly Frank Thornton disappears, and there's Captain Peacock.
I'm afraid that the whole occasion just sort of overcame us. Can we have a little more decorum, please?
In 1962, David Croft's first comedy caper was Hugh and I, with Terry Scott and Hugh Lloyd. The girl in the crash helmet would soon become the owner of the most famous pussy in comedy history.
I mean, we're going down to the coast. Well, how nice. Brighton? Oh, nothing so common. Hove.
Molly Sugden, for instance, I knew. I thought, well, she'd be marvellous as the sort of frosty old lady behind the counter. And, the people come into a show for that sort of reason. You know them, and you know they'll make a marvellous job of it.
He said, oh, by the way, there's something coming up that we've written, especially with you in mind. And of course, what is it? He said, you'll know when the time comes. You'll get the script quite soon. And in about 2 weeks, I got the script, and it was Are You Being Served?
From the DM/CR to FW/LNGD/SP, re-T.
Captain Peacock, what language are you speaking?
After the old battle axe, the handsome hunk. Rummaging around in the huge ITV hit The Dustbin Men, Croft got his hands on Trevor Bannister.
Hey, Mum! What? The Dustbin Men!
It was enormously popular. It got 21.5 million viewers on its first episode and maintained that for 21 episodes, which has never been done before or since. And, in fact, it's in the Guinness Book of Records.
I'm like Winston Churchill, you see. Naturally brilliant, but no good at exams. Or, to put it another way, I'm just plain ignorant.
Mr. Breathing, I don't care about your ignorance. Give us a bit of pigging bliss.
And went down to the famous Jerry's Club, which is where all the dropout actors and all of us go. And I bumped into a man called David Croft, whom I'd not met before. And he said, I'm glad I've met you here. He said, I've got a script for a pilot and I want you to do it, you know. And I said, oh, well, great, fine. I read the script and I thought it was very amusing.
Croft added little-known actors Nicholas Smith, John Inman and Wendy Richard to make the gang complete. The pilot was recorded and everyone waited for Are You Being Served to make its debut in the BBC's Comedy Playhouse slot. If the ratings were good and the management liked it, the series was on.
The BBC didn't actually like the pilot, and they disliked it so much that when the series of short playlets under the umbrella Comedy Playhouse was put on, they didn't show it.
And then they had a terrible disaster at the Olympic Games, I think it was in Munich, where there was a terrible tragedy, and they suddenly had blank screens and they needed something, and somebody reached for the nearest show, basically, which turned out to be Are You Being Served?
And they put it on, and 19 million people saw it, and obviously sufficient numbers of them absolutely loved it.
And we took off from that. It got such a reaction that they said, we'll book this one for a series. And that was it.
But that wasn't quite it. Even with the huge viewing figures, the BBC was still unsure about giving Grace Brothers their custom. One of the staff was causing them a bit of a problem.
Camping. I beg your pardon.
Bill Cotton, who was running the BBC at the time, said, well, the show is wonderful, but get rid of the puff. And I said, well, which one's that? And he said, John Inman. I said, well, he's a sissy, you know, he's a bit of a mother's boy, but he walks a bit funny, I admit. But I mean, it never occurred to me at the time that he was overtly a homosexual.
I said, well, you know, Bill, there's no show without the puff. It's a vital comedy character.
And David is reputed to have said, well, if the puff goes, I go. And the puff stayed.
The puff stayed. Are You Being Served opened for business, and audiences flocked to it like the first day of the Harrods sale.
There was no great honeymoon period before we really got up and running on the first series after the pilot. You know, sometimes you get a mixture of actors together and it might take them 2 series, even longer, when you've got a largish cast, for them to really get to know each other, to trust each other. And that wasn't the case with us.
Good morning, Mrs. Slocum.
Good morning,
Miss Brahms.
Captain Peacock.
1 minute late.
You're lucky to have me at all, Captain Peacock. I had to throw my pussy out before I came.
Yes, when they came to a scene, they knew how to get hold of it. They knew how to work on it, how to rehearse it. They knew where the laughs were, and of course, their wonderful timing.
It took 70 million years for nature to build these resources of coal and oil. In the space of 70 short years, man has ravished them.
It's typical of men.
The fact is, we cannot get enough. True.
They knew how to play an audience and how to hear the reaction to an audience, and it's a great art, and they were absolute masters at it.
Keeping the men at home interested in late-night shopping was Wendy Richard as Miss Brahms. Leggy, lippy, a saucy seaside postcard come to life.
You've got a problem there.
Well, you're lot supposed to be men, you should know.
We haven't got the same problem.
I remember at work one day saying something about, of course, I'm the sex symbol, and John Inman said, no, you're not, it's me. And I believed him. But if you saw the fan mail and stuff I got, I mean, I was so thick, Wendy, not Miss Brahms, that I didn't realise, you know, to a load of Americans and other chaps and everything, Miss Brahms really was quite a sex symbol. And I never realised.
Wendy had previously popped up in ITV comedies Please Sir and On the Buses, and could also claim to be the first Essex girl in ancient Rome.
Stop here, please! Leave him alone, the young master. I know where he hasn't been, please. Now, find your straws and get out.
I've still got them on.
Straws, not drawers. Oh, she's common, she really is.
Oh, you mean no straws?
Yes, straws. Yes, now come on then.
They are. You having another raffle?
Having a what?
Another raffle.
Yes, and this time you aren't the prize, so don't bother. Yes, oh dear, poor soul. What a weight to have to carry around all day.
Wendy had also appeared in Dad's Army and The Likely Lads, but her earliest connection with David Croft was an episode of Hugh and I, which is now lost. It was her first comedy role and began her partnership with Molly Sugden.
I think it was probably one of her first jobs. She was very, very young. And so we had a little basis to start with. And of course she was wonderful to be behind the counter with, because of course we spent a lot of time behind that counter. Mostly, if you're not doing a scene on television, you just go away and you can chat or do whatever you like. But you couldn't in Are You Being Served, because there was always a chance that they would see you in the background of the store, so you had to be behind the counter. And I can't think of anybody I'd rather be behind a counter with than Wendy. She was so interesting and fascinating and great fun. So, and there was a slight mother and daughter feeling about it. There still is a bit. I still worry about her and want the best for her.
By the third series, Are You Being Served had entered the national consciousness, and workplaces would ring with the cries of, I'm free! Everyone had their favourite character too, with a surprising number rooting for the big-eared bloke in the back office.
Take everything down, Miss Ainsworth.
I've taken everything down. Knock, come in. I believe you wanted to have a word with me, Mr. Rumbold. I've been waiting 5 minutes to have a word with you, Mr. Granger. I came as quickly as I could. Do you recognise this book? Yes, I think so. Take everything down, Miss Ainsworth. I've taken everything down.
Don't put down what you say.
Shall I put that down?
No. Let's start again.
The thing about Rumbold, I read the first script and thought, now this man is an idiot. He misunderstands everything. He's also thoroughly devious.
Like many of the cast, Nicholas Smith was no stranger to comedy when David Croft came calling. He'd been in Doctor in the House, Up Pompeii, and The Liverbirds, and had the perfect preparation for the character of Rumbold on The Frost Report.
The council has decided to advance your grant to improve the value of your property.
You're going to have a row of 40-foot pylons across your vegetable patch.
He's thought hard about Are You Being Served, so pin your ears back and listen to Mr. Rumbold's theory of comedy.
It's extremely difficult, I think, in modern society to write comedies, either for the theatre or television or films, because most comedy is based on there being accepted rules which you can't break.
I think I should tell you now, sir, that we're not doing the dance.
But you've got to do the dance.
The answer is no.
You've got to try and find a situation in which there are still rules.
If I topple Peacock, I'll drag you down with me, and you'll get nowhere without a reference.
The men are behind me, sir.
True.
Nicholas is right. Take away the funny costumes and the Bavarian Umpar band, and Are You Being Served is a sophisticated comedy of manners set in a well-known institution. Add some choice catchphrases and the pussy jokes, and fame awaits.
I was decorating my bathroom,
when it first happened, and I went for some thinners, for some turpentine, to Woolworths in Portobello Road, because I lived in Notting Hill Gate then. And I was attacked by several ladies with prams, screaming, "There he is, there he is." And it went in a phase. It was, that's him from the shop, that's Mr. Humphreys, and then, thank God, it went to, oh, look, there's John Inman.
As it happened, it turned out to be a great success, and at one time we had over 20 million viewers, and even when it comes on again now, there are a lot of younger viewers that weren't even born when that was done who enjoy it.
By 1977, Are You Being Served was so successful that the obligatory movie of the hit series was made, and the comedy connections start shooting off in all directions, as the stars are given their own shows. John Inman was lured to ITV with his very own show and a brand new character. Well, sort of.
And this is what I want. Hundreds of them coming off the assembly line. We must keep going like we did before, keeping the wheels of the Little Hampton Rock Factory turning faster than ever. Percy, turn the wheel and let's get cracking. Whatever we do, we'll jump in.
Jeremy Lloyd and David Croft gave Molly Sugden a star vehicle that sent her into space.
Do you know, I still get letters from America saying, when are you going to do some more? I mean, at my age, can you imagine me floating about on a Kirby wire now?
Come Back, Mrs. Noah was a very good idea, which actually David Croft had, about using Molly Sugden, basically, as a lady that won an atomic kettle in the year 2035, and went to the British space station to investigate being shown round and pressed the wrong button, and it took off with a lamp bulb changer and 2 scientists and somebody else who couldn't do anything. And we had wonderful special effects, but only 6 shows, because the BBC didn't really like it.
Bit of a shock to you, Mrs. Noah?
It's come as a bit of a shock to all of us, isn't it?
I've left a chicken in the oven.
Come Back, Mrs. Noah shows David Croft using his own unofficial repertory company. Ian Lavender from Dad's Army was the man in the specs. Co-stars Michael Knowles and Donald Hewlett were in Dad's Army, Are You Being Served, and they would star as upper-class twits in the 1988 comedy You Rang, My Lord. But they're best remembered as Ashwood and Reynolds in Croft's next hit series. Teaming up with his Dad's Army writing partner Jimmy Perry, It Ain't Half Hot Mum combined a forces setting with the social comedy of Are You Being Served, and gave us class warfare in the jungle.
I think the army, of course, has its own hierarchy, and everybody knows what it is.
Is that the only hat you've got, Gunner?
Yes, Sergeant Major. It's MO's orders. It protects my head from the sun. I've got very thin skull bones.
Well, you know why that is, don't you?
No.
You've got such a huge brain. It's rubbing on the inside and wearing your head out.
When you're on location, and you have a lot of extras on the show, you find that the private extras gather in one section and the officer extras gather in another section. I mean, they're all extras, but they sort of associate with their own rank.
I see. These are working men's caps.
I was in India and Malaya, and my partner Jimmy Perry, he ran a concert party for the Royal Artillery in India. So it was second nature to us to be able to write that sort of thing.
Any complaints?
If I may say so, sir, the diet is extremely monotonous.
Monotonous? What do you mean monotonous? Monday you had corned beef hash, Tuesday you had corned beef fritters, today you got cold corned beef. What's monotonous about that?
Everything all right? Not bad, sir. The only trouble is they get more or less the same thing every day.
Well, it's just as bad for the officers. Up to the back teeth with chicken.
They're great, Jimmy and David. They would watch people and observe their mannerisms. I remember an incident with Donald and I in Ain't Half Hot, when Donald was in the Navy during the war, and he was chatting one day. He said, "Oh God," he said, "I was in the Navy." He said, "You know, I did basic training." He said, "It was the worst 2 weeks of my life before I got commissioned." And a few weeks later, this appeared in the script.
When I was in the ranks, the food was absolutely uneatable. It was the worst 2 weeks of my life.
With material that close to hand, No wonder the shows kept on coming. David Croft moved into the 80s with Oh Happy Band and Hi-de-Hi, a kind of It Ain't Half Cold Mum in a holiday camp. Meanwhile, his purple-rinsed protégé Molly Sugden was larger than life in That's My Boy, which ran for 6 series, which is 5 more than John Inman's Take a Letter, Mr. Jones. But that was lucky, really, because it meant he was free to go down under, where TV producers had embarked on a freakish remake of Are You Being Served, and just couldn't live without him.
The excuse was made, it was told me, that they couldn't find anybody camp enough. But when I got there, I found that was totally untrue.
Welcome to Australia, Mr. Humphreys. I'm Mr. Dunkley. This is my floor, and I'm very proud of it.
Yes, you've got a nice shine on it. What sort of polish do you have?
I wasted an awful lot of videotape because I couldn't remember their names. Having done so many episodes with Mrs. Slocum and Captain Peacock, it was very difficult for me to remember Mrs. Crawford and Captain Wagstaff.
This is Mrs. Crawford, head of ladies, and Miss Buxton, her junior.
May I say how pleased we are, and I am unanimous in this, and that also goes for my assistant.
And this is Mr. Bakovich, who'll be over you, and this is young Mr. Randall, who'll be under you.
It's just like being at home.
And at home, audiences hadn't taken to Oh Happy Band, but Hi-de-Hi, with its nostalgic setting and familiar comic characters, became a massive ratings smash.
I used to produce shows at Butlins, and my partner, Jimmy Perry, was a redcoat. We knew all about the Butlin world and the structure of holiday camps.
Be sincere in everything you do. Be sincere is all I ask of you.
It was a world we knew well, and we depicted it, I think.
So, between 1968 and 1982, David Croft and his collaborators Jimmy Perry and Jeremy Lloyd had created Dad's Army, Are You Being Served, It Ain't Half Hot Mum, and Hi-de-Hi. That's 4 more sitcoms than most people manage in an entire career. But the question was, what could they do next?
We'd finished Are You Being Served, then we decided we'd write something sort of upstairs, downstairs, which David did anyway later, and we had 2 days on that, and we were just doing the downstairs part, a sort of comedy upstairs, downstairs, and I wasn't enjoying it. You know, either something's going or it's not. So I lay under the table when he'd gone to have a think, and about midnight I thought about doing the French Resistance. I phoned him up, he was in bed, and I said, I'm not enjoying what we're doing. He said, so what are you going to do about it? I said, what about doing the French Resistance? He said, well, we'll start tomorrow then. Good night.
Oh, Annette! At last we are alone. Hold me. Kiss me. Oh, it seems so very long.
What does?
It seemed an ideal setting because there was danger, excitement, seduction, of generals to find out, what the plans were, etc. Hiding people. I mean, and a central thing is a cafe where everybody comes to, so you've got the perfect set, really.
Good morning.
You stupid woman.
When we had the best of any pair or any threesome, when in any scene, we could cut to somebody else very quickly.
Listen very carefully. I shall say this only once.
Clap! And therefore the show has great pace.
Maria, you will put this in here and clip it to the leg of one of the pigeons. You, René, will write a description of the uniforms we require. Here is the pepper supplied with the cylinder.
What shall I say?
To London. Please supply urgently by parachute drop at your earliest convenience. German uniforms as follows.
With Hello, Hello, Croft and Lloyd perfected the style of comedy they first used on Are You Being Served? Find a situation full of conflict, fill it with a big cast of strong characters, and add catchphrases and crowd-pleasing gags. Make it nostalgic and satirical at the same time. Et voila. But Croft and Lloyd's brilliant partnership couldn't end without a return to the people who brought them together. In 1992, they whisked the staff of Grace Brothers away from the shop floor and gave them a country hotel to run.
in Grace and Favour, we actually went on location, lovely locations in the Cotswolds and on a farm, and it was great fun.
There's a rumour that you weren't on your own last night.
I wonder where that came from.
Well, don't look at me.
I don't feel like any breakfast this morning. I think I'll go for a manly walk. I might pop into the village and buy a pipe.
And a couple of ounces of St. Bruno.
In my opinion, it should never, ever have been called Grace and Favour. It should have been called what it's called in America. It's called Are You Being Served Again?
Some of the others didn't like it so much because they said we lost this hierarchical thing that we had before. And I said to Jeremy when we did the second series, I think it ought to be emphasised that Rumbold is still the manager of the hotel, because thus we can produce more friction. And he said, yes, I think you're right. And in the second series, I think that is more or less what happened.
In 1995, David Croft, OBE, produced one last series for the BBC and marked the privatisation of the railways by taking a satirical swipe at the industry in Oh, Dr. Beeching. But like the Age of Steam, it looked like Croft's quintessentially English style of comedy had run out of puff.
Right, lads, on the train.
There's lots of us are all part of David Croft's repertory company. In fact, years ago when I went to David's This Is Your Life, I sat there with Molly and the pair of us had tears in our eyes because, I mean, don't forget, we're very proud of David apart from being extremely fond of him. And I looked round at all the artists sitting there and I thought, he's made stars of every one of you.
With hindsight, you realise how fortunate we were to be in that sort of period when all these great comedies were being written and to be part of them. It's belonging to a sort of fellowship of comedy, I suppose, that I don't think will ever be repeated. That was a golden vein that's no longer there.
And what happened to the staff of Grace Brothers? At 84, Molly Sugden still takes the occasional role, as does Nicholas Smith. Frank Thornton and Trevor Bannister are running from the Grim Reaper in Last of the Summer Wine. John Inman is probably the world's pre-eminent pantomime dame, and Wendy Richard has another household name, Pauline Fowler.
Dot comes in, and she walks up to Pauline, and she said, "Are you free?" And I looked. I went, "Yes, I'm free." Well, the crew loved it, but Julia Smith said no. It was a shame, you know. I thought it's a nice show. You've got a bit of a sense of humour.
Not in my department, you can't.
But for many of us, they'll always be ready to serve in a forgotten corner of a fictional store that will be forever England.
This gentleman is going to a fancy dress do and wishes to use the gents' facilities to try it on.
Yes, the gentleman's department would be more suitable. This way, if you please, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Granger, are you free?
I'm sorry, Captain Peacock, but I'm just going to have my coffee in the staff cafe.
Mr. Humphreys, are you free?
I'm busy pricing my ties, Captain Peacock.
The gentleman wishes to try on a dress.
I'm free.